Shri Nrsimha Avirbhav Tithi Maha Mahotsava ki. In essence, a philosophy consists of a conception of self, meaning what am I, and also a conception of world. Just try. Hey, I don't know why, it's not you sit down and the baby screams or you get up and leave. There's something in between where you stick around but you try to figure it out. Maybe not. I don't know. What'd she keep saying?
She's saying Naya.
Where is Naya?
She's right here.
Okay, so that's the problem. You should suss this out before I give class. I mean, Naya shouldn't be present, A, and you should figure this out before I start giving class. That way it won't be a problem. Yeah, go. Shh. Hey, shh. Shh. Wait, shh. All right, let's see if that works. It's cute, but it's disrupting my class. You should try better. But I don't want you came all the way down. I don't want you to leave. In essence, a philosophy consists of two ideas, namely, what am I? Who's been fasting all day? From water also. Keep your hand up if you fast from water as well. Okay. So I feel badly, but I'm going to break fast now. I've also been fasting from water, and I'd encourage you to do the same. So my good wife is going to set up some juices up there. So you guys can just, those of you who are fasting from water, within 1 or 2 minutes, there's going to be some juices up there. Go ahead and just grab them. Yeah, and it's not, when I say a philosophy consists of two pieces, namely a conception of self and a conception of the world, that's not some sort of arbitrary idea that I'm foisting on you, and it's my exotic conception of what a philosophy should be. But what's a philosophy? It's a systematic explanation of what exists. What exists? Well, I exist. How do I know I exist? Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. In fact, if you're wondering whether you exist or not, then you have to exist in order to wonder whether or not you exist. And so the mere act of doubting whether or not you exist confirms that in fact you do exist. And you, us as conscious beings, is the least doubtable thing in the whole world because it's what we're most intimately aware of from the moment we wake up in this world and we're born. Your consciousness never departs you. And in fact, when your consciousness does depart you, you've died. Then the other thing that you can't doubt is that there's a world. And if you do doubt there's a world, let's say you have a brain in a vat idea. You guys familiar with the brain in a vat philosophy? That we could be delusionally imagining the whole world exists when in fact all that exists is ourselves. Like a brain in a vat. Imagining the world. But if you do believe that, then you still have at least the illusion of an experience of the world, and therefore you have to explain the world as illusion. And it's actually more complicated to imagine the world is completely imagined by you, because then you'd have to account for all of the diversity and all the uniqueness that exists in the world, and you'd also have to account for the illusion that would make it appear so even though it wasn't so. So it doesn't become simpler to imagine that the world is your delusion. It becomes more complicated because you have to explain all the variety within the world, and then an added feature, namely that you are in a beguiled state imagining all of it. Did you guys follow that? So with Occam's razor and the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the best, the brain of that theory is actually more complicated and more difficult, and therefore it's ruled out by a simpler theory, namely that the world actually exists around you. Did you guys follow that? I'm going to say it one more time. This isn't particularly complicated, but you do have to pay attention. Let me say it again. A philosophy essentially consists of two parts, namely you and the world. Because you can't doubt those things, because you are conscious. You can't doubt your consciousness, and if you do, you just prove you're conscious. And number two, there's a world around you, and even if you doubt the world exists, you have to explain how that illusion arose, and in fact, explaining how the illusion arose is more complicated than just acknowledging that the world exists, because not only do you have to explain the whole world, but then you have to add this extra feature, namely that you are imagining the whole thing. Did you guys follow that? Did you follow that? I'm going to say it one more time. I want you guys to actually get this. And this isn't what we're going to talk about, but I do want to make sure everybody's paying attention. We're going to be moving quickly, and so I want to say it one more time. This is a useful thing. When you say a philosophy consists of two parts, the theory of self and the theory of the world, that's not just some arbitrary idea. It's the most natural thing in the world. Just like if you say a human being has legs and arms. How do you know you have legs and arms? I don't know. I look. I see my legs. I see my arms. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. Similarly, you exist because you're conscious, and if you're wondering whether you exist or not, you exist. In order to wonder whether you exist, you have to exist. Number two, and it's just slightly more complicated, but it's the same basic idea, the world exists. And if you doubt whether the world exists, even the idea that the world doesn't exist depends on you coming up with a theory which explains the whole world with unlimited variety, and then adding an extra feature onto it, namely that it's all an illusion. And that's a more complicated thing to explain than just admitting that the world exists. Therefore, a brain in the vat theory or a solipsistic theory that you're the only thing that exists and you're imagining everything is actually more complicated, not more simple than just acknowledging that the world exists. Did you follow that? It's tight, isn't it? And because you talk to people all the time, you can see the value in this, right? Everybody's a philosopher. Who hasn't drunk yet? There's juice there. Go and drink. It's all set up for you. Thank you. I feel badly otherwise. You guys are all the sadhus fasting, and then I'm drinking in front of you, tempting you, like seducing you to the dark side by drinking juice in front of you when you've been piously fasting the whole day. And congratulations to all of you for fasting. Sadhu, sadhu. I wasn't planning to fast from water today, but I just couldn't bring myself to drink water. And as the day wore on, I just kept telling myself, I'll just wait an extra hour or two. And then at a certain point it was 4, and then it was only 4 more hours. And how could I go the whole day fasting from water and then break down the last couple of hours? That would just be ridiculous. That's how you do it, by the way. That's how you accomplish a goal. You tell yourself to hold out for a certain amount of time, and then you start, once you pass that Rubicon, once you pass you're on the back 9, and you tell yourself, hey, I'm almost there. Let me just keep going. We're all philosophers. There's no way to live in this world and not have a sense of who you are and have thought about it on some level. There's no way to live in this world without having a sense of what's around and what's existing. And there's no way to live in this world without putting that stuff together and starting to develop a value system, which is called ethics. And your value system can also include what's desirable, and that's called aesthetics. And when you take ethics, what's good and what's valuable and what's meaningful, and then also what's beautiful and worth pursuing and therefore meaningful, those two things, ethics and aesthetics, mix together and become something called axiology, which essentially is the study of value. What's worth pursuing, what's good, what's beautiful, what has meaning, what's worthwhile. And if you just to exist in the world automatically, even if you've never formally done it, you're going to have an idea of who you are. Even if it's just what your parents told you were. Even if it's just that you're a cog in a machine and you're in the rat race, you're going to have that you're a unit, you know, of work, a work unit. No matter what your theory is, you're going to have a theory that you are an enjoyer. That's a theory of self. And then you're going to have an idea of what the world is. Because you're in the world. There's no way to not start map it out and notice there's stores around and cars and other people and beaches and oceans and mountains. There's just no way to not do that. And then you start to sort through the world and place yourself in the world. And as you place yourself in the world and conceive of the world in relationship to yourself and yourself in relationship to the world, and you start to think of those two things together, you start to think about what is valuable, what's worth pursuing, what's meaningful, what's true, what's real. And now you're squarely into the realm of ethics and aesthetics, which together form axiology, which is really the study of value. And you start to think through what is my place in this world, what's worth pursuing. Did you all follow that? This stuff is so basic that it's a travesty that this isn't taught in school, in grade school. It's also a travesty that isn't mandatorily taught in college. It's insane to me that people aren't taught by their parents and their teachers from a very, very young age to think about the world in this very elegant, systematic, obvious, natural way. It's natural to be philosophical about the world. In fact, we are all philosophical. Whether we think about it formally or not, there's no way to live in this world without being a philosopher. And when you recognize that, you start to now automatically play the game at a much higher level because you realize what you're doing. Does that make sense? Okay. So, philosophy, two things. Self, world. And accepting those things are real is actually the simplest philosophy. And then working from there. And then you got to sort through it, and now you're squarely in the realm of ethics. Stay, you're good. Just stay, you're fine. Just keep going. Just work a little harder. Be embarrassed and ashamed. You're not a more diligent mother who's trained her child better. My kids were not making this kind of noise. I've had 6 of them. They've never made this kind of noise. And if you start to fight, hey, if you just start to get a little bit, it doesn't have to smack your kid or anything, but that little bit of sharpness. Hey! It works. See? And we get like a good solid couple of minutes from that. And you keep tantalizing things away from her eyes, give her a little tool to play with, breastfeed her at intervals, bounce her a little bit, and it'll all work out. And then you stay. I don't want you leaving. You come all the way down, and half the time you're not here. It displeases me and it disturbs me. I want you here. Okay? All right. And then what's a theology? We know what a philosophy is, and we're all philosophers, and that we should think more carefully about this stuff. And we should think about ourselves and the world, our place in the world. But what's a theology? That's what a philosophy is. What's a theology? Non-rhetorical. Impress me. Yeah.
It's a system that explains us, the world, and God.
That's right. It's the same exact system I just explained. There's just one added feature. You have a concept of God, and that concept of God turns your philosophy into a theology. Therefore, that's 3 parts: self, world, and God. God is the origin of the world and the self. and the relationship between, now it's a triangle. So you have how God created the world. God created us. We're connected to God by love. We're connected to this world by karma. The world is connected to God as its evolute. You follow? And now you start to think about these three things and their interrelations. And that is a theology. It's just the same exact obvious natural thing I explained to you that a philosophy was, combined with an added feature, namely that you believe in God, a higher power. And you get many gods, you're polytheistic, you can believe nature's God, you're pantheistic, you can believe that everything exists within God, but God's also simultaneously beyond the world. That's panentheism, everything within God. You can be a monotheist. There's one God. You can be a monolatrist. There could be more than one God, but only of them is truly worthy of worship. You could be a henotheist. There may be many gods, but you have your God that you worship, and that's like, for you, that's the most important one. And there's all sorts of different names for all sorts of... A deistic God is transcendent, not related to the world. Panentheistic, again, that God is both pantheistic and deistic, transcendent as well as immanent, within the world and beyond the world, or rather, the world exists within God. Pan and theos, everything is within God. You can have a dystheistic notion of divinity, that God is evil or angry, or, like if you look at, say, a traditional polytheistic worldview, like Roman or Greek polytheism or Nordic, really they were just worshiping comic book heroes. And that's why Thor became a comic book hero. Because you get these super powerful beings who are also lusty and angry and greedy, and it's a comic book hero. Amazingly, within ancient Greek philosophy, before the time of Buddha, the Greeks had figured out, on the island of Naxos, they'd figured out that probably there was one supreme Lord above all of them. In fact, that's what Judaism is. It's the rise within a polytheistic milieu of a monotheistic or a monolatristic idea that there's only one supreme Lord. There's one, there's a hierarchy, and there's one supreme God above all others. And so within Babylonian or Egyptian society, Judaism rose up. Babylonian, really. Judaism rose up. And actually Vaishnavism is the same thing within Hinduism. And amazingly, they had this cult of monotheistic worship of Zeus before the time of Buddha in the Mediterranean. It just naturally happens as you start to think, what's really behind all this? And you start to think more deeply, and you move from a pre-theistic period in your life or within a society into a pre-philosophical concept into a really, well thought out philosophical concept. And that's when, one supreme Lord starts to make sense. One source of everything. And in fact, that's Vedanta. That's our tradition. Jamadi yasya yataha. Jamadi yasya yataha. That there is that thing from whom all things come. That is Brahman, is our term. Monistic, that everything is the same. We're actually a monistic philosophy because we believe that we are individual souls, but we're part of God and we're spiritual, and in that sense we are one with God. But we are qualified monism because we don't believe that we are absolutely one with God. We believe that within that oneness there's enough room for a relationship. If you were absolutely one with God, then there'd be no room for love. Love, compassion would be an illusion. Love is a uniting force between two individuals. If the individuality dissipates and disappears at some point, then the love also disappears. If you believe in love as a forever concept, then you must believe in individuality on some level as a forever concept, and therefore our monism is a qualified monism, where we are one with God in spirit, but God is always the creator, we're the created. God is always the source, we're the effect, etc. Do you guys follow this? That's Philosophy 101, Theology 101. And they're really the same, and that's why I had to explain philosophy so we could appreciate theology. Now, what distinguishes one religion from another? It's really simple. A different concept of self, a different concept of world, but most importantly, because it's the genesis of both self and world, a different concept of God. That's what makes one religion one thing and another religion another, is their conception of God. And in fact, their concept of the world comes from their concept of God. For instance, take a look at Christianity. Just as a, of course, you guys are a bad audience to use Christianity as a cultural reference to, because all of the Indian people in the audience don't know anything about Christianity. And if you think you do, you probably don't really, because it's an unusual and somewhat exotic philosophy. And unless you're born into it, it takes some serious study. I usually use Christianity as a cultural reference. And so anyway, I'll do a double. I'll do a Hindu cultural reference and a Christian one. You take a look at the Christian idea that, the world is filled with temptation and you are invested with immortal sin. And Adam and Eve messed up a long time ago, and then everybody else has messed up ever since then. And really, you're broken. You're fractured. And there has to be somebody who appears from outside of you who vicariously atones for you, because you're so messed up you can never fix it on your own. So somebody has to come and perform a human sacrifice and die and bleed in order to pay the blood debt that you owe to God, such that you might know divine life. And really, piety consists of understanding how fallen you are and being super grateful to Jesus while simultaneously considering everybody else is condemned to go to hell because they don't believe what you believe. It's like a weird, extreme pride mixed with extreme humility, kind of low self-esteem because you think you're fundamentally broken, which, if you taught that to children, it's practically speaking child abuse. But if you wrap it up as religion and claim freedom of religion, then you can teach children that they're fundamentally broken. Imagine a small child playing with dolls, which is what psychologists do when they want to find out what makes a kid tick. They give them dolls to play with and watch. And imagine that the two dolls were playing, and the one doll was saying to the other doll, "You're evil, you're broken, you're no good, you're going to hell, you're going to burn forever unless you accept Jesus, who's the only person who can save you. And you have, on your own, you're nothing, useless, you're bad." And the other doll's like, "Yes, you are right. I will get on my knees and pray and forever reflect on my badness and wear this instrument of the sacrificial instrument, the torture device, around my neck as a constant reminder of my innate badness. And I will symbolically engage in cannibalistic symbolic activity by eating a wafer and drinking grape juice to symbolize the body and blood of my master who was tortured. And I'll forever think about that until eventually the wounds of Jesus appear in my body, which is the proof that I've truly become saintly, because I now suffer vicarious wounds. I was raised Christian, so I'm allowed to make a critique of Christianity. It's my tradition. Born and bred into it. I'm allowed to say what I want to, especially if I can logically back it up. That sounds like a weird philosophy, but not really. Not when you look at the fundamental dualism of Christianity, where there's really not God, it's God and the devil is equally powerful. And not when you look at the old world view of those, really Christianity is Judaism, and Judaism is a sacrificial cult where you had to extirpate your sins and pay with a blood sacrifice by sacrificing animal, the same way that the Aztecs did animal sacrifices. Did you know that the Aztecs used to, they ruled from Mexico, from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to the Pacific Ocean? Did you know that? The entire kind of all of Mexico was ruled by the Aztecs. And they had runners who would run at 3.6 mile increments, super fast runners who were trained from a young age to run. And they would run fish from the Gulf of Mexico to the west coast so it could be enjoyed by the kings. And they would also run snow from mountaintops so people could have ice, because before refrigeration, snow existed, but it was so far away that they'd run snow and ice down so people could have sorbets and stuff like that. They would also perform human sacrifice and then hollow out the chest of the victim and light a fire sacrifice in the chest cavity of a sacrificed human being, and then light torches like the Olympic torch, and then they would run those torches to all the Aztec temples all over their empire. Right? I just read that yesterday. I was simultaneously horrified and also impressed. It was but I couldn't help but notice the fire sacrifice and the idea of sacrifice. And it's so common to like world culture. You find it in the old Irish culture. You find it in Judaism. But that's Christianity. It's Jesus now becomes the sacrifice. He's the human sacrifice. And so when you understand, a sacrificial culture and a sacrificial idea about the nature of the world, and that good and evil exists, and that evil's really bad, also that debts can be passed on to your children. That didn't used to exist. It used to be that if you were going to be whipped because you'd done something bad, you could depute your child to go and get whipped for you. So this idea of Jesus suffering for us made sense because people were passing off their debts to either their slaves or their children. In civilized countries, it's long since been, disbanded. This idea of passing on your debts to your children, that they can go to jail for you. But those things were all part of that worldview, and therefore the concept of God ended up having those features. And so that makes perfect sense. Passing on your debts from Adam and Eve down to us, therefore we're broken. God and the devil kind of being equal. And therefore the world is just filled with bad things. It's a bad place, and you're tempted in this world. And really the best thing you can want to do is just die and go back to heaven. That's called millenarianism. It's been around forever. And so when you start to look at some of the weird ideas that are very commonplace within Christianity, for example, you find that it really comes from a theology, an idea about the nature of the world and God and God's relationship to the world. And so when you look at a given philosophy, you hear their stories, you hear their narrations, and then it tells you about what they believe. And there's a concept of divinity that's within their stories. And then you hear them and you listen to them with a little bit of empathy and some respect, and then you can think through them comparatively. And you can start to compare ideas, and it's not that just all religions are one. There could be different ideas, some of which are better ideas and worse ideas. But to get to that place where you could do a little comparative analysis, you have to give a listen to their narrations, you have to give a listen to their ideas, and you have to start to think about what does this say about their idea about the nature of the world. Do you follow that? So if you really want to understand tradition, pretty much you ask, what's your concept of divinity? And then, how is divinity related to this world and you? And it tells you everything you could ever want to know, and it's very simple. It's a simple framework, and anytime you meet anybody from any religion, you can ask them some questions. What's your concept of divinity? Tell me about God in your tradition. Tell me how you think about God, how you worship God. When you pray, what's your concept of divinity? What does God look like? What does he sound like? What does she sound like? What's the nature of divinity? Is your relationship fear-based or love-based? If it's love-based, is it intimate love or formal love? If it's intimate love, how do you fall in love with divinity? You must have to forget at some point that God's God in order to really fall in love. What's God doing all that during that time? Is God a lover? If God's really a lover, can God fall in love with you back? If God falls in love with you back, then God has to be capable of growth. Is God transcendent or immanent or both? Is he in this world or beyond this world? You start asking these questions. Everything, people tell you everything you could ever want to know. And you can enter into a tradition, hack into it at a really deep level and powerfully understand it. Now, as a general rule, we are not into fear-based religion at all. We're into love-based religion. We're into intimate love-based division, so much so that we worship God as a child. Because we don't even want to ask God to do anything for us. We just want to love God. So we don't worship God as a child that we care for. That we never ask what you can do for me. We ask what we can do for you. That's, by the way, why JFK's famous speech, State of the Union speech, he says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. There's a reason why that soundbite is so powerful and is one of the greatest speeches ever given by a president. Because he hit on the essence of all of it. That really we all want a higher purpose to live for. Human beings are not meant to be individualistic and just what's in it for me. We're meant to be a part of something bigger than ourselves and to participate in something greater than ourselves since the very beginning. That's how human civilization flourishes. A communal, tribe-like, community-based relationship. Individualism, which is in vogue now, recently, in the West. See? Imagine if I was actually sitting with her. How much better I'd do than you, Mom. Even from 30 feet away. I'm doing a better job of keeping your kid quiet than you are. Show your face. Let me see a little shame on that face. There you go. Just do your best. I want you here. Hey, shh. Hey. Yeah, our tradition loves God as a child. We don't ask for anything. We just ask what we can do. We're not into fear. We're just into love. But then we've got this Nrsimha thing going on, which is weird. Hare Krishnas should not worship Nrsimha. I'm going to tell you the story of Nrsimha, but now that you've understood everything I said beforehand, it's going to hopefully, if I did a good job, it's going to hit differently. You're going to see things in the story you never saw before. Now, by the way, every tradition has to have a protector. Why? Because the world is dangerous. And even if you have a concept of the self is pure, the self is inherently good like we do, that the world is fundamentally your friend, that karma is actually your friend, that the world's set up for education, that God loves you tremendously, that this world is the best of all possible worlds. This world must be the best of all possible worlds, because if it's not, God's either not all good or not all powerful. Because an all good God would want the best of all possible worlds, and an all powerful God could make the best of all possible worlds. Much as I hate Christianity, they did really hone in on the necessity of free will, and how free will explains all the suffering that exists in the world. And so you got to give them credit for that. It's such an important philosophical principle that solves so many issues. That God no longer becomes a source of evil or bad or suffering. So you got to appreciate that. The articulation of the essential nature of free will. If you want to have the belief that God is all good and all powerful, you have to believe in free will, because God actually cedes some of his power to you so that love can exist, because love depends on freedom and choice. And so without freedom, you couldn't love. And a world with the possibility of love is better than a world without the possibility of love. A world with the possibility of love and then the concomitant necessary possibility of suffering is better than a world without the possibility of suffering, but no possibility of love. And therefore God created the best of all possible worlds, which included giving us free will. And therefore God's not truly omnipotent, because he would have had to have given us free will to create the best of all possible worlds. And now the world becomes this loving act of sacrifice on the part of God, where he gave up his powers so that love could exist. It becomes a very, very beautiful, life-affirming conception of the world. Even with that idea, you still break a leg or suffer or get sick or someone dies or accidents happen. And so the world has variables that you can't quantify for. But we want to try and quantify for them. And so you always seek protection from divinity against the world. For the greatest devotees, they don't need protection. They could live or die, it doesn't matter. I mean, our tradition says the great devotees are willing to go to hell if that's what the Lord wants. They have the idea of hell doesn't scare them. Nothing scares them because they think of Krishna, they love Krishna, they want nothing from Krishna, they're satisfied in that, and therefore there is no more fear. Therefore they become abhay charan. They become fearless at the feet of the divine. Not because they know Krishna will protect them, and therefore nothing bad will happen to them. Because they know that nothing bad can happen, because the only bad thing that can happen is you forget divinity, or you turn away from divinity. And that's fully within their power. And so they're always turning towards divinity, and therefore there's no more fear in the world. That doesn't mean they might not get sick or get in an accident or die. It just means those things will never knock them off their game. They've actually transcended the world functionally, because they've gone to a place that the world can't take away from them. They've communed with divinity. And the result is that the world no longer becomes dangerous. You follow? Therefore, there's no need for Nrsimha, like long term, in our Braj Bhakti tradition. He has some play in the Leela. Actually, Nanda Maharaj has a family deity of Nrsimha. So in Nandagaon, where Krishna lives eternally, they worship a family deity, and that deity is Nrsimha. And so he's there, just like Katyayani Devi is there. And the gopis are worshiping Katyayani Devi, looking for a husband. In the form, and Krishna comes and fulfills their desire. The other deities are there, but they're not there. They got no teeth. We are not like them. We are not great devotees. We happened upon this incredibly deep tradition that takes you to a logical place beyond all fear. But we haven't embraced that tradition. Therefore, we still live in fear. And when you have fear, you want to stack the deck in your favor, and you have to have an Archangel Michael or an Archangel Gabriel. You got to have a Kali. You got to have a Nrsimha. You got to have a Ganesh. Ganesh is the remover of obstacles and difficulties for all of Hinduism. But when you become a Vaishnava, you can't worship Ganesh anymore. So then Nrsimha becomes your Ganesh-like figure that you worship at the beginning of every auspicious event. Like we're doing a haldi ceremony. My son's getting married next month. We're doing a haldi ceremony. It's like a super Hindu ritual. It's not in our scriptures. It's a local ritual, not in our core texts. When you look at our Kriya Sar Deepika that outlines Vivaha Yagnas and the wedding ceremonies that are done in our tradition, it doesn't have this. But we're going to do it because it's cool and it's fun. You put turmeric on each other and everybody wears yellow, and it's a gala affair. Actually, Rupa Nuga Prabhu turned me on to it. I wasn't going to do it. I'd never had any idea of doing a haldi ceremony. But then Rupa Nuga Prabhu, Brajapriya, his daughter got married, she did it. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And so I thought, we'll do the same thing. I'm just following in your footsteps, Prabhuji. But then we can't worship. Ganesh is worship for Haldi. So we don't worship Ganesh, so we make up a ritual and we do a Nrsimha Yagna. And that's what the Haldi ceremony is. You do a Nrsimha Yagna, a fire sacrifice. We literally will build a fire, offer grains at the fire. It's a non-violent fire sacrifice, no caving in people's chests or throwing an animal on the barbecue, but it's just the fire's there, and we keep that ritual alive in a super clean way. But we keep that ritual alive. We've been doing that nonviolent yagna forever. We've had the vegan yagna thing going on forever. The vegan sacrifice instead of the animal sacrifice. But anyway, we've got this Nrsimha thing, and there's a reason why Nrsimha is important to us. It's because we're not really full devotees. And to the extent you're not a full devotee, you're afraid of the world. And to the extent you're afraid of the world, you need a protector. And to the extent you're afraid of the world and you need a protector, you ask God for something, namely to protect you from the dangerous things in this world. But we're devotees, so we can't worship anybody but Krishna, so we worship Krishna in the form of Nrsimha. Does that make sense? As you advance, Nrsimha becomes much more about, I'm not afraid of anything outside. I just don't want anything inside for me to turn away. So I'm praying I never turn away from you. So now Nrsimha is not to keep us safe from the outside world, it's to keep us safe from ourselves. Then Nrsimha becomes a purifier that purifies you no matter what he throws at you, so you can enter Vrindavan. Your desire is no longer to be saved or protected. Your desire is to love Krishna intimately. And then Nrsimha, you pray to him again, but you pray to him that he makes it possible for you to enter Vrindavan. And at that point, when you're praying to Nrsimha for that, you're no longer afraid of the material world. Nrsimha, let me suffer if I need to, but please don't deny me the ability to go to Vrindavan. Whatever purification I need to go through so that I can make it to Vrindavan and embrace Krishna, I'll suffer that. You please govern that. You please help me extricate myself from this world and wind up in the Rasa Leela with Krishna. So Nrsimha, it's not that you just, you advance and he completely goes away. He's seen differently in our tradition. Anyway, I'm now going to tell the story of Nrsimha's avatar. And I want you to listen to it and try to see, what does this teach you about our tradition? What lessons do you learn from it? We're going to go quickly now. We're going to move quickly now. And also, I don't believe that Nrsimha is the hero. The story of Nrsimha is actually the story of Prahlad. Prahlad's the hero. And the story of Nrsimha becomes much more beautiful when you think of Prahlad as being the hero. Anyway, one day, Hiranyakashipu, a really bad king, took over the government, and he made a very capitalistic, very violent, very cutthroat, politicized world, where he encouraged deceit and violence and stepping on others' heads to get ahead. And he wasn't just a materialist. He was actually quite austere. He was quite austere. He had some good qualities, some fine qualities, such as some stoicism to some extent, and also an ability to perform tremendous austerities and work incredibly hard. But he had this core materialism, which took all these otherwise good qualities, like a bunch of zeros, and never put a one in front of it. So it just became a big row of zeros with no value. Because it was never being a part of something bigger than himself. That was absent from his idea. He was ultimately an individualist and a materialist, and although he had this great ability to perform austerities and incredible personal prowess and even self-control to some extent, they were all a bunch of zeros with no one in front of it, because he wasn't a part of something bigger than himself. And so the 10 zeros still, a Google of zero is still zero without that one in front of it. A Google, by the way, is a 1 with 100 zeros after it. I'm assuming you guys knew that. Then he had a son. His son's name was Prahlad. Prahlad. And he wanted to train his son up to take over the kingdom and be a materialist just like him. So he sent his kid to get trained up by teachers, in how to be political, how to betray people and make alliances, and kind of Machiavellian type philosophy. And then one day he said, "Tell me what you've learned in school. Tell me what you've learned." And Prahlad said, "I've learned that materialism is a blind well that you fall into and never get out of. And that better we give our lives to serving Krishna. And that's the only thing worth doing." And Hiranyakashipu thought, my kid's not emulating my bad qualities. I'm violent, I'm cruel, and my kid has this, higher concept of self, of life, and it's bothering me. And so he sent his kid back to the Gurukul and said, you need to teach him better. Sanda Namarka were his teachers. He said, teach him better. So they taught him rigorously in Sama, Dan, Bade, Danda. First you pacify people, then you give them things, then you divide and conquer, and finally you use violence against them. As it's a fourfold political system of Indian statecraft, where first you ignore dissenting voices, then you try to pacify them with a bribe, then you enter in like a spy and you divide them up and you get them fighting with each other, and then finally if none of that works, you just kill them off. So they taught him that. Prahlad was totally not into it. Anyway, then his father brought him back again and he said, tell me what you've learned now. And then his famous verse, one of our most famous verses, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmani Vedanam. He said there's 9 ways to serve Krishna. You can hear about him, you can chant about him, you can remember him, you can serve him, and accept him as your friend, and as your master, give your life over, etc., and do ritual worship. And so it's a very famous verse, a verse that we quote all the time. And that totally spun his dad out. And now his dad practically put him in prison. And then they really tried to teach him how to be a materialist. The world was all conspiring against him to breed into him materialism. But Prahlad wasn't having a bar of it, even though he was a young kid, 5 years old, young kid. He wasn't having a bar of it. And in fact, when the teachers left, then Prahlad spoke to his friends and taught them how to be devotees and inspired all of his classmates and got them thinking about higher topics in life and spirituality. At that point, they were afraid he was going to ruin their whole scene. They took him back to his father, and his father said, kill my son. He's getting in the way of my enjoyment. He's getting in the way of my security. This whole higher power, live a life of devotion thing is grotesque to me. And just kill him. And they tried to kill him, but they couldn't. A miracle happened. Krishna interceded. And Prahlad never worshipped Nrsimha. Prahlad worshipped Govinda, Krishna. And so then they tried to kill him, and somehow he kept evading death. Nothing they could do could kill him. It was like he was protected. That got him even more scared, because now they realized there was someone who had something in them that was beyond what they could control for, and what they could quell, and what they could, put out. He had a light in them that they couldn't put out. So they put him back, carefully, and that's when he started. That's when he started preaching to the kids. Actually, I got to mess up time on it. That's when he started preaching to the kids, and then finally the father said, "I'm going to kill my son." He dragged him in front of him, unsheathed his sword, but he was just so angry. How is it that I can't control you? How is it that there's something in you that's indomitable? And his son said, it's the same power that made you. Krishna's everywhere. He's in everyone's heart. And just like a magnet is naturally, iron is attracted to a magnet. Similarly, I'm attracted to Krishna. It's the most natural thing in the world. And the source of my power is the source of your power. There's a source of all power in this world. Instead of trying to divide people and turn the world into friends and enemies, you should spend your time communing with that force. And the father just couldn't hear it. He couldn't hear from his son. He couldn't learn from his son. And so, just as he was about to kill his son, he said, you think God's everywhere? Is he in this pillar? He was in a... He was in this palace. Thank you. Within the palace where the throne room is, I guess, the throne room. There's a throne room where the palace is, where the court is held. And there's a pillar there. And he says, are you in this pillar? And Prahlad said, of course he's in that pillar. He's everywhere. And he said, nonsense. No one's going to protect you. He slammed the pillar with his fist. And then a huge sound came from the pillar. And scared everybody. Because it was like a sound they'd never heard before. And then all of a sudden the pillar broke open. And out of the pillar came Nrsimha. Simha means lion. Nara means man. We also call Nrsimha Narahadi. So Hadi also means lion. I'm assuming because Hadi scares everything and takes everything away and is the king of the jungle. I'm assuming Hadi comes from Har, it means to take away. So I'm assuming that Hadi comes from the same root Har, it means who takes away, and the animal that's the king of the jungle that is an apex predator and takes everything away from everybody else, but never anything taken away is also called Hadi. What do you think? Right? That's obviously what it is. I never looked it up etymologically, but I'm sure that's what the meaning is. Nara Hadi. So Hadi there means lion. Or it could also mean half man, half God. That would be another way of interpreting it as well. That also works. Hadi is also a name for God, who takes away all your pain and all your sorrow. And so, Nrsimha, Narahadi, half man, half lion. And so, the deity was a lion's face. This manifestation of Krishna in the world. This miraculous manifestation of Krishna, like a burning bush within Judaism. But this was much more colorful. And of course, couldn't all-powerful God appear in this world? Yes. Wouldn't all good God want to appear in this world? Yes. Would there be some instances of that all good, all-powerful God appearing in the world? Certainly there would be. Would those be miracles? Absolutely. Would the owner of physics, would the creator of physics be able to transcend the laws of physics? Yes. The problem we have with God appearing in this world is we don't believe in God. Not that there's any logical inconsistency with an all-good and all-powerful God appearing in the world. It's just you don't believe in God, therefore it seems fantastic. If you believe in God, then this seems reasonable. And you're more concerned with, well, tell me the nature of that deity that appeared. Tell me what that deity did. Tell me, is it an all-good deity? Is it an evil deity? Is it an angry deity? Smiting and smoting people? Demanding blood sacrifices? So anyway, Nrsimha appeared. And he had the face of a lion, and like erect ears, and his jaw was parted. You could see his tongue was like a dueling sword, and his nostrils and his mouth looked like caves, and his eyes looked like molten gold. Tongue was darting around. He was looking around. And he had a mane of white hair surrounding his face. And his shoulders were broad, his waist was thin. He had unlimited arms. That's the human feature. Strong legs like a human being. Half man, half lion. A tearing throat. Like a werewolf, but divine. And he immediately, and now Hiranyakashipu saw the Lord appearing in this incredibly fierce form and thought, I'm in, let's do this, grabbed his club and flew towards Nrsimha like a moth flies into a flame. Disappeared. And Nrsimha grabbed him. He was moving like a hawk, trying to move really fast, a lot of footwork. Nrsimha just grabbed him and then let him go. And we let him go. The demigods, who were all low class, they got scared because they didn't have faith. The devotees didn't have any doubts, but the demigods, like us, they had some doubts because they need protection, because they're materialistic. And then Hiranyakashipu dropped his club and thought, I'll use a sword and a shield. That's a better weapon. So he refrained. He was caught, just held, like helplessly. He didn't let go. But somehow he thought he was going to win the second time around. He thought he was so powerful that Nrsimha was scared of him, so he let him go. So he grabbed a sword and a shield, thinking that was a better configuration to win this gladiatorial conflict. Gladiatorial? Either one, conflict. And so he then went back in. And Nrsimha toyed with him a bit and then eventually just grabbed him. And so the rule was this, that Hiranyakashipu had gotten a benediction because he was semi-religious, but like very materialistically. And so when he did some pious acts, he always wanted to get something. So he prayed that he would be given a benediction, that he would never be killed inside or outside, in day or night, on land, on water, or in the air, by anything living or dead, by any animal or human being, or by any weapon. Did I get them all? And so Nrsimha sat down at the threshold, in between inside and outside, put Hiranyakashipu on his lap. And when night and day were mixed, he then took his nails, which are not living or dead, and pierced his abdomen and eviscerated him. And then, for extra credit, disemboweled him and wore his intestines as a garland. Nrsimha Bhagavan ki! It's a fierce manifestation of, that God can be a justice giver when required. And Hiranyakashipu didn't listen to all the warning signs. And Krishna had a sense of humor. He had some panache. He managed to pick a form which wasn't animal or human, not inside or outside, not day or night, not in the air, not on the land, because it's on his lap, not with anything living or dead, and he kept all the promises intact. Then what happens afterwards is as important as that. That's important for us feeling protected. But what happens afterwards is even more important. Then Nrsimha killed all of Hiranyakashipu's soldiers who were somehow dumb enough to think they should still fight him. And then he sat down on the throne as the king and was just angry. And all the different Brahma, Shiva, Lakshmi even, and then all the deities, the Devas, the Kinnaras, the Kimpurushas, the Charanas, the Siddhas, the Pitris, everybody. Did I say the Gandharvas? Everybody came forward. And they all these different categories of saints and sages and powerful entities, they came forward and they tried to pacify Nrsimha. And they prayed to him and none of it worked. Then finally they pushed Prahlad forward. And Nrsimha saw Prahlad and his mood softened and he touched Prahlad on the head. And Prahlad began glorifying Nrsimha. Beautiful prayers of confidence, of devotion, of faith, of acceptance. And at a certain point, Nrsimha said to Prahlad, he says, ask me for any benediction you want. And Prahlad said, you're my Lord. I'm your devotee. Why would I ever ask you for anything? This has always been our relationship. This will always be our relationship. I don't need anything from you. But if you want to give me something, then, and there's this famous verse, Yadi dasyasi me kaman, varam tvam vardarshava. Yadi, if you, dasyasi, you want to give, tvam, if you want to give me, right? Varam tvam, if you want to give to me, me, kaman, some desire I have. Yadi dasyasi me kaman, varam tvam vardarshava. You are the greatest giver of benedictions. If you want to give a benediction to me, if that's what you want to do, then kamanam hridyasam roham. Kamanam hridhi asam roham. Bhavatas tu vrene varam. I pray to you, vrene varam. I pray to you for the benediction. Bhavatas, from you, my Lord. What? Kamanam hridhi asam roham. That the desire for things never grows in my heart. I pray that I never want to ask you for anything. I pray that I'm satisfied forever just serving you and asking for nothing in return. You want to give me a benediction? Give me that benediction. And then Nrsimha blessed him. 21 generations of your forefathers will go back to heaven. You'll live a long life. You'll be happy. Nrsimha was just throwing benedictions out, but Prahlad was not. did not need that. That's the story of Nrsimha. And a key to understand the story is that Prahlad's the hero. Nrsimha made a cameo performance, an important cameo, but the real hero of the story is Prahlad. And Hiranyakashipu teaches you just as much as Prahlad does. All right, let's go quick. What do we learn from the story? 10 things. Non-rhetorical. Let's start going, guys. Shri.
Krishna can be moved by sincere devotee love.
Nrsimha was affected by Prahlad's love. No one else could affect him. All the fear-based people didn't pacify him. The person with absolute confidence and no fear, who wasn't praying to him for protection, who didn't ask for anything. That's the love that Nrsimha was thirsty for. It proves that for God to be a lover, love requires empathy. Empathy requires vulnerability. A true deity would be capable of vulnerability and love. And you see a perfect example of that with Nrsimha at a beautiful point, great point, maybe the most important point of the whole story. Yes?
There's a point at which we don't need to worship Nrsimha.
Yeah, there's a point where Gaudiya Vaishnavas don't worship Nrsimha forever. That's part of the gig. And there's a few evolutions, a few echelons, and maybe we'll formally do it to teach other people, but on the way to Braj Bhakti, fear is given up, and it's replaced by greed, that you just want to be with Krishna, and whatever the world throws you. The gopis were told Krishna has a headache, give him your foot dust. Brahma and Shiva wouldn't give the foot dust, the gopis were giving buckets of their foot dust. And they said, well, how can you put your foot dust on Krishna's head? They said, because Krishna has a headache, he says he needs our foot dust. But you'll go to hell for offending the deity by taking the dust from your feet and sprinkling it on the deity's head. They said, that's okay, no problem. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, let me be born as an insect in the home of a devotee. Zero fear. Good. Excellent. Yes?
The Lord took a special form just to keep intact the promise or benediction of his devotees.
The Lord has a great sense of humor. He's super creative. He's smart, brilliant, and kept Brahma's prayer intact. And it's just a masterful organizer. Just the best taskmaster in the universe. We should have that faith that Krishna can magically arrange things in our life, and will. And to be a devotee means to experience that on a regular basis, how kind and loving and just like incredibly brilliant and magnanimous Krishna is. Good. Excellent. More. Yes?
God as the justice giver.
Say it again.
God as the justice giver, meting out justice, punishment, like he says in Bhagavad Gita.
Nrsimha teaches us that God is justice.
Well, meting out justice, we're not any question. Giving him punishment for his sins.
Okay, so God is a justice giver. Thank you. Good. More. Yes. Yell at me. I'm having a hard time.
That Nara means man and Sita means lion.
Say it one more time. Oh, that Nara means man and that Simha means lion? Oh, you learned that. That's great. Okay. A+. That's fantastic. Thank you. More. Yes.
Prahlad wasn't fearless because he knew that Nrsimha would protect him, but rather because he knew that the only thing to fear was not having Krishna.
That's right.
in his control.
And that was from day one. Prahlad didn't evolve. From day one, he had that realization. He's a hero. He's fearless. It's powerful. It's attractive. What a wonderful goal to have in life. To be a part of something bigger than yourself such that you become truly unafraid of the nature of the material world because you're in a place that the material world can't take away from you. Right? Yeah. Excellent. More. Yes.
One of the greatest offenses you can make is harming devotees.
Absolutely. I didn't say that, but that's woven in the fabric of the story. Excellent point. Yeah. Don't offend devotees. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. We learn about God through devotees. The first manifestation of God's grace on us is through the devotees. When you experience God directly through a miraculous spurti or vision, you should be more grateful to the devotees because they're the ones who put you in a place where that could happen. And so we're ever grateful to the devotees. We never want to bite the hand that feeds us. The devotees are Krishna Preshta. They're dear to Krishna. They are literally a manifestation of God's grace in this world. And we should be conscientious about that. There's always an apostle. There's always an Ananda for Buddha. There's always a Muhammad. There's always a Moses or an Abraham. And we have to recognize the servant as much as we recognize the master, because we learn about the master through the servant, through the prophet. Excellent point. More. Yes?
He was always trying to teach his peers and even his teachers how to, be a good devotee and be devout.
It's natural if you have something valuable that you'll want to share it with other people. It's natural. There's something wrong with being miserly. If you've discovered something beautiful, you should want to get on a soapbox and tell people about it. Maybe not in a kitschy way, but you should want to share. We should all be a part of sharing a message. If we found a message that's valuable, we should make it our life's goal to share that message with others. That's the proof you have a valuable message. That you've received a valuable message is you want to pass it on to the next guy. Excellent. Yes. I saw yes. You, son. Yeah.
I learned that God is always willing to help the devotees.
Krishna will always help the devotees. We don't have to ask for it separately. You just be a devotee, and Krishna will do his part. We're always thinking, hey, Krishna, please protect me, as if Krishna is not on top of his game. As if we've got to remind Krishna, because being omniscient, is a problem. Krishna might forget stuff. So we go, we're praying to an omnipotent deity, and one of the potencies would be that you're omniscient. You're all-knowing. But somehow or other, Krishna might forget stuff, so we have to constantly remind him of our petty material desires, because Krishna doesn't know what we need. It's just the insanity of it, right? Excellent. More. New people. Yes. An omnipotent deity could appear in any form, and an omnibenevolent deity, an all-good God, would want to help the devotees. And Krishna will appear in your life in miraculous ways, confirming his existence and helping you. And you're not alone. Krishna's always with you. Excellent. Excellent. One of the most important points. Yes. More. Yes.
Prahlad was rebellious against his father. He didn't take his father's, he was not just his father, but also the king, and the idea to buy and sell.
Prahlad was so powerful. He was so powerful, subversive, rebellious, truth to power. Right? That's right. Was unafraid. Excellent. At a young age. Even without a bunch of weapons at his disposal, even without calculating anything. He had the truth, and that was enough to empower him. Excellent. Excellent point. More, yeah.
We should aspire to be like allowed to love the Lord without asking for anything.
We need to take that idea and enshrine that idea in our heart. We may not be able to pray like that today, but we should take that idea that someday we will pray like that, and that should be put in an altar in our heart, and we should spend the rest of our lives worshiping that idea and putting it up high as a Mount Everest-like goal, such that someday that idea becomes ours. More. New. Yes.
So one thing I was observing that the Nrsimha was angry after killing Hiranyakashipu. So I don't know whether in all avatars that fierce.
Nrsimha's angry. We only have brahmacharis worship Nrsimha in an angry form. If you have sex life, you're not allowed to worship Nrsimha. So married householders are not allowed to worship Nrsimha. Only celibate monks, lifelong celibate monks, are able to worship him. So like in our temple in Mayapur, only lifelong celibate monks who've taken a lifelong vow of celibacy are allowed to worship Nrsimha. And except for one day a year when they do the Abhishek, which was yesterday, and then they let some grihastas on the altar one day a year. But other than that, 364 days a year, it's only monks. And that's in the angry form. So grihastas worship Nrsimha as Lakshmi Nrsimha. And Nrsimha is in a happy mood with Lakshmi, giving benedictions. And so even within Nrsimha, there's different forms. Like you have Kali as the angry form of the goddess, and then you have like Parvati or Vaishnavi Devi as the happy form of the goddess. Similarly, Nrsimha within the Vaishnava cult has these different faces. And so there are different deities. And that deity coming out of the pillar, angry, looking for Hiranyakashipu, That's the angry form. And so, as a source of anger in this world, as anger for a divine purpose, as anger for the purpose of justice, because such things exist, they also must have their origin in God. And God also must be the source of death, because just as much as the source of, life. And you have to have a worldview which can, encapsulate everything coming from God and not just the good stuff. Otherwise, you're left with a bunch of bad stuff, can't figure out where it came from, and now you have to posit a devil-like figure. Did you follow that? Good. I think we'll finish there. Let's do some kirtan now. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.